During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk a little about grain bin safety. I can just tell you, growing up on the farm, this is something that our dad talked to us a lot about, just safety around grain bins, around the augers that you would use to load grain bins, all those types of things. And I think about that even today, even though I don't have to anymore run a lot of the augers on our farm, I still, every single hooded sweatshirt I get, I cut the strings off, because I just remember somebody who had gotten close to one of those augers when I was a kid and got his string caught in the auger. Well, we got to look at all those safety issues on the farm.
Well, it seems like such a peaceful place, Brian. You've got this bin that just sits there stationary, and it's full of grain, and well, there can't be anything wrong with that, but there are certainly some potential issues that you need to be aware of if you're going to go anywhere near a bin.
Yeah, so again, this is our Farm Basics time today, and we kind of gear this around non-farmers. So if you are a non-farmer, we just want you to understand that inside that grain bin, things can go wrong. What usually goes wrong is there's extra moisture that gets on some of the top layer of grain just as it sits there for many months. And when that happens, then the grain starts to stick together and it forms somewhat of a crust. Well, when the farmer starts taking grain out the bottom, that crust remains at that point, and then there's a hollow space there. So we've actually had some cases in the past where the farmer goes in to kind of bust up any issues, and he falls right down through stuff. So that's one of the potential problems there can be in a grain bin.
Well, when you think about it, how are we going to get the grain out of the bin? And if we're going out of a bottom unload auger, so an auger kind of in the center of the bin, down at the bottom, and all that grain's going to flow through, well, it'll end up being like a cone shape in the bin with the grain. And if you have some of that crusting like Brian talked about, you may have some issues where all of a sudden a chunk of that grain gets down in there and plugs things up. If a farmer goes in to try to fix that so he can keep the grain flowing out of his bin, that can be a real issue. And it's like a lot of things.
Oh, wait, stop. What do you mean by a real issue? That can be a real issue how?
Well, if you've got an auger that's bringing the grain out of the bin, and a farmer goes in there with that auger running, he's taking a lot of risk. So we just want to be real cautious about that. We want to shut that auger off, go in, do what repairs you need to do, and then get back out of the bin before you start back up.
But by risk, what we're talking about is the farmer can then sink down just like quicksand in that grain and get pulled down toward that auger. So not that the farmer is going to necessarily go in the auger, but just that the farmer is going to go below the level of the grain, so he's completely covered by the grain, and now he suffocates.
So what farmers will do as they get into these bins is they've got body harnesses and ropes. So if they've got a buddy outside the bin, he can man the rope. The farmer can go in, and if there's any trouble, his buddy can help pull him back out of the bin just to be safe. Or if something happened like that, they get pulled down in the grain, well, you've got the rope right there. You can see right where he's at, and you can quickly get him back out so he's safe.
So this is one of the things, as grain bins have gotten bigger and bigger over the years, we probably get more worried about it than we ever did before. But knowing what we do know today about all the things that can go wrong with grain bins, just putting the grain in the bin, taking the grain out of the bin, we have to be really careful around these things. So we always talk to farmers about make sure you have a buddy whenever you're going into that grain bin. Have somebody that's going to monitor you, and like Darren said, use a harness, use ropes, do anything you can to keep yourself safe.
And just keep checking that grain bin throughout the season. Make sure the moisture percentage is down so you have good storability, and watch out for bugs and those types of things that can get into stored grain. If you do that, if the grain stays in good condition, generally you won't have any issues.
Well, one thing you hopefully won't have any issues with is our Weed of the Week. But if you do, we'll talk about how to control it later in the show.